Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good evening. Headliners is in just a moment. First, a roundup of the latest news. And the top story, the Prime Minister has urged the public to trust her to do what it takes to get the economy in Britain growing again. And a warning for those watching, this next part does have some flashing imagery. In her closing speech at Conservative Party conference in Birmingham, where she was heckled, incidentally, by Greenpeace protesters, Liz Truss promised she was ready to make hard choices for the country. She also attempted to reassure the party that she and the Chancellor were in complete lockstep with one another.
Growth means more money in people's pockets. It means businesses creating new jobs. Growth means people can feel secure and they can plan for their future. Fundamentally, growth helps people fulfil their hopes and their dreams. And that's why our dynamic new Chancellor and I will be taking action in 3 areas.
Well, away from politics, a man who caused a gas explosion which killed a toddler in Lancashire has been jailed for 15 years. Darren Greenham used an angle grinder to cut a copper gas pipe, which he planned to sell as scrap metal. He was under the influence of drink and drugs at the time. 2-year-old George Hines, who lived with his family next door, died in the blast, which happened in May last year. And a French court has cleared 3 British teachers of any wrongdoing over the death of a 12-year-old girl who drowned while she was on a school trip in 2015. Jessica Lawson died after a pontoon capsized in a lake near Limoges. Stephen Lane, Chantal Lewis and Daisy Stathers were found not guilty of the French equivalent of manslaughter by gross negligence. And in the United States, the actor Alec Baldwin and the production company behind the movie Rust have reached an undisclosed settlement with the estate of the cinematographer Helena Hutchins. Miss Hutchins was killed on the set of the film in October last year after a prop gun that Mr. Baldwin was holding discharged. Lawyers representing Miss Hutchins' husband, Matthew, and their son had sued for wrongful death. All parties have now agreed it was an accident. The decision means filming of the movie will now continue. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Andrew Doyle, and joining me today, fresh from the holy day of Yom Kippur, it's Josh Howie, and fresh from a day pumping iron, it's Nick Dixon. And let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages. We're going to start with the Daily Mail, and they're going with Defiant Liz takes fight to her critics. This is after tempestuous 12 days. She rouses the Tories by vowing to defeat the enemies of growth. Onto the Telegraph now. Income taxes to rise by 21 billion despite budget, and rapidly advancing Ukraine could retake Crimea, says US. And now we have The Guardian. Truss delivers a new common enemy to a fractured Tory party. She's talking there about the so-called enemies of growth. That's the phrase that she's coined for that particular enemy. And Thursday's Financial Times, they go with US hits out at oil cuts that align OPEC with Russia. We're going to be covering that one later on. The Mirror leads with Stop the Killer Dogs. There have been 9 deaths from savage attacks this year, and there are now demands for new laws on dangerous dogs. Thursday's Times leads with U-turn or face election wipeout, Truss warned, and plea for European help against blackouts. We're going to be covering that one as well. The front cover of the Metro goes with moving on up, or is Liz moving on out? This is about the turmoil within the Tory party at the conference and an allusion there to the M People hit Moving On Up, which has been used as the theme tune for Liz Truss this year. And finally, we go to the Daily Star, bucking the trend as ever. This is a story we are going to get to later in the show. The world of chess with intrigue, the Dark Knight. This is a chess prodigy, apparently cheated 100 times. And those are your front pages. And we're going to kick off with Thursday's Telegraph now. And Liz Truss preparing to smite her enemies. Nick, she's getting tough.
Yeah, it was quite a tough speech. It was good. The headline is, "I'll defeat the enemies of enterprise, holding Britain back." And as you say, she's coined this phrase, the anti-growth coalition, which is, some of them are in her own party, but she mainly means the opposition. And she also was able to refer to those protesters that came in, the sort of eco-protesters. She said they were part of the anti-growth coalition, and it was a sort of quite good ad-lib.
It's quite a neat phrase, isn't it? Because it encapsulates Labour, Lib Dems and those rebels within the Tories.
Basically,
and
the entire
protesters.
country.
Everyone but her.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously she's in a top position following the fallout from the mini-budget, the gilt yields, the interest rates, the tax U-turn, particularly disastrous, her own party turning against the Gove up to his old tricks. But she was quite strong on Ukraine. I mean, it's a bit hawkish for me, but she said Ukraine can win, they must win, and they will win, and that got a huge applause. She said it's not these people that glue themselves to coalition just doesn't get it. So that bit was really strong to me. It was almost something you'd expect to hear from Labour. It was a celebration of the average working person. And I also, of course, like the part she said about comprehensive schools that we'll get to, because I've got a lot on that. And another thing she said that struck me was she said, I remember getting a paycheck and seeing how much is taken out in tax. I thought it was quite a strong point, because you can imagine Liz Truss getting a normal paycheck. If Boris Johnson said that, you'd be like, you don't get paychecks, you just have vague aristocratic money or something.
Yes,
but when
donations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But when Truss says it, you think, yeah, she's a fairly normal person who will have been through that. The question is, will it convince the markets, will it convince her party or the general public?
What do you think, Josh? I mean, are you impressed by the speech? I mean, given that obviously she's had a bit of a few ups and downs at the Tory conference, let's just say. She was forced to reverse the 45p top tax cuts, you know, things like that. Hasn't been going necessarily her way.
Well, it's a bit rich her coming out and being like, I'm for you, working people, you're my people. It's like, well, no, you've just cut the taxes, or you tried to cut the taxes for the
but
people
she's reversed that. She's reversed
Well, she's reversed it, but the point is, don't then come out and sort of try and... For the working people, she cut taxes for the 1p. You know, for those people, for the rich people, she cut it by, you know... And she tried to. But
and there are these threats of cuts to welfare as well, which of course...
Well, that's another story. But the bit I actually didn't... There's a lot of bits I didn't really like. I mean, she's trying to, like I say before, trying to sort of make everybody who's against her somehow like the enemy, in that they're trying to destroy... Enemy. Well, they're her enemy. It doesn't mean they're actually trying to destroy England or the UK, I mean. And the other thing is the stuff about reversing the Boris... I thought that was one of the good things that Boris did, this whole anti-obesity... Yes. I think it's a really important thing. And if we want to save money, obesity is one of the biggest costs for the NHS. So any efforts towards that...
But Liz Truss's whole principle is that she doesn't want to be the person that tells people what to do. You know, she wants a Conservative Party that basically puts power back in your hands, choices in your hands, a kind of libertarian approach. I mean, there's something to be said for that, isn't there?
There's something to be said for that, but at the same time, putting the... she's not saying that you can't buy... Jaffa cakes. It's just saying maybe just don't put it so readily available.
What about this, Nick, though? I mean, we're talking there about her characterising those who oppose her policies as enemies. But that might be quite simplistic. But I suppose that's what the protesters she alluded to, the ones outside the Tory conference who were shouting the Tories are evil, Tory scum, Tories are trying to kill the poor. I mean, that's quite an ungenerous interpretation as well, isn't it? Yeah,
I mean, I was saying to you just before air that they even on Twitter started shouting, well, not shouting, tweeting Tory scum at Rachel Wearmouth, who's a deputy political editor of the New Statesman.
Oh, so it's a kind of everyone.
It's a kind of, it's not the most thought out thing. Obviously, yeah, it was horrible what they did to Michael Fabricant. I thought all that was pretty appalling. And so, so why can't she be quite tough with her speech? I like the bit when she said about Labour and the SNP, have they ever seen a tax rise they don't like? And my favourite personal bit actually may have been this, where she talked about the talking heads, the Brexit deniers. She said they prefer talking on Twitter to taking tough decisions. They taxi from North London townhouses to the BBC studio. That kind of just hit all my prejudices in a perfect way.
You live in a North London townhouse.
A townhouse? I think I live in a townhouse.
You haven't been to Nick's house.
Well, he lives in a North London. You got a cab here. Where'd you get your cab here from?
I live in a...
North London.
I admit all the time I live amongst the enemy in North London, in a tiny shoebox that I can barely afford.
Is not a townhouse. Anyway, moving on to Thursday's Mirror. Now, this is an interesting one. Gordon Brown warning of a revolution, Josh.
Yeah, this is a little bit over-egged. They say there's going to be... Gordon Brown says there's going to be a national uprising if Tories slash benefits for the poor. I suspect what there will be a new government in 2 years. Also, a lot of the... I should say what they're planning to do is to cut benefits in line with wage growth as opposed to inflation.
When Boris Johnson had said that he was going to increase benefits in line with inflation, he'd made that clear, right?
He made that very clear. They're talking about possibly back. She certainly hasn't said that she's going to go along with that policy, but a lot of Tories are saying you've got to.
But this is the question. As it says in the article here, she has refused to rule it out. That's not the same as saying that she's definitely going to pursue this particular line. You know, we don't know yet, actually. Where
we don't know, but this is the thing. You know, when we talk about benefits, the idea is, you know, it's sort of brought out. Oh, we're talking about these people with 20 kids and they're ripping off the system and they're idle and whatever. The reality is, 40% of people on tax credits have a job, and they have a low-paid job, and it doesn't pay. It's not enough money to pay for all of their. Just to have a normal life, to stay off food banks, to pay for the heating.
Bring you in on that, because as a right-winger or a supporter of Truss, at least, can we say that?
Not really, but go on.
OK, but isn't there a point to be made here? What Josh is saying is absolutely right. You know, you can be on universal credit. You've already got a job, but it just doesn't pay enough. I mean, these people are really struggling.
I've been in that position as well. It's absolutely true. Our country's massively sympathised, and that's where Suella Braverman was a bit tone deaf on that. But yeah, this problem with the...
what did Suella Braverman say?
Oh, she said that she was talking about people not in work, but it's not really people not in work. She said people should be working, but the problem is these people are working. So that was the issue.
I suppose the trouble is there will be some people who are idle, but most people are working their damnedest and they just can't earn enough.
Exactly.
Right?
Most people are trying hard. The thing about this benefits, the real terms cut or whatever, in line with inflation, It's come from Gordon Brown saying this. Gordon Brown, some people think, set a booby trap with that tax rate because he changed the top rate of tax just before he left, and now years later it's erupted and destroyed Truss. So that's quite interesting. But also, they needed somewhere to cut, didn't they? Because they've got what critics will call the 45 billion unfunded tax plan, because they've done it all through borrowing rather than cut. So they need somewhere to cut. But obviously, politically, this looks terrible when you've had that, even though it's been U-turned, you had that top rate of tax, but you haven't raised the benefits in line with inflation. It looks politically bad, and that's why so many people are against it.
Strapping the cap on bankers' bonuses as well. I mean, just in terms of pure PR.
Exactly.
You're talking about how she's talking about, helping the working people. Are there mixed messages here, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course it is. That's why it makes no sense. She talked in her speech about the people who wake up in the morning at the crack of dawn. These are the people who do that. The people who work at Tesco's and the supermarkets. They're the ones. And even with their income, even after their full day, they still don't earn enough money to live their life with, respect.
Nick, I mean, some of the figures in this article are quite shocking. I mean, this is the Resolution Foundation saying that this real terms cut to the welfare state would leave a single adult £391 worse off, a single parent of one £607 worse off, and a working family with 2 children £1,000 and 61 worse. I mean, those kind of figures, when you're poor, when you're on the poverty line, that's the difference between being able to eat and not, right?
Yes, I've been on benefits. It's very tough. This is why many of the party are against it. Everyone from Lord Frost to Gove to Estimate Vade to Penny Mordaunt. So this is probably why something will be changed on this.
Yeah.
I appreciate what they're trying to do. They're trying to go for growth. They didn't spec it out properly. They didn't explain what they were doing properly. Financial markets have kind of overreacted. So it's been a disaster. But I do at least appreciate the principle that you can't tax your way to growth. That's the principle.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, there is something to that, isn't there? I mean, ultimately, the messaging maybe was pretty bad, and they didn't really explain what they were trying to do particularly well. But on the other hand, if the economy does, if the economy does grow in the way that she hopes it will, that will trickle down to people. It will bring more people into the country, you know.
Well, it's a big if, and then again, there's never any guarantees that these people actually spend the money. There's actually idea because interest rates are going up, people save their money who are earning lots of money rather than spending it. The idea is that they, build a new house at the bottom of their garden, which would employ new builders and this and that. But actually, if inflation's gone up that much, if interest rates have gone up that much, people might just save it. So there isn't any proof that it actually works.
OK. Well, we're going on apparently to the Telegraph now. This is the Metro. This is about the working class. Are the working class coming in fashion? Have you got this one, Nick?
Is this about the comprehensive schools?
Yes.
OK, I didn't quite get the intro, but this is my favourite story. So the Metro's gone with Liz Truss claims she's first PM from a comprehensive, but that's not true. Except it is true, except on the technicality that Theresa May's school, while she was there, switched to a comprehensive.
So it's not true?
Well, you can argue that technicality. They're arguing throughout the article. They're arguing that Gordon Brown went to a comprehensive, which is ridiculous because when he was there, it was selective. He was also fast-tracked 2 years ahead in a special experimental scheme. So they then list a load of people who went to state education. Which prime ministers were state educated? And they list a load of prime ministers that all went to grammar schools because the point is, yes, it was state education, but it was grammar schools which were destroyed by the left because they weren't equal enough. So we destroyed this brilliant grammar school system we had. And people like Brian Simon were behind it, who was an actual lifelong member of the Communist Party, and people like R.H. Tawney, who was merely a socialist. The grammar schools were destroyed. We used to have the strongest schools in the world. It was said that a set of English or British A-levels was equivalent to a degree in the United States. We destroyed all this in the name of equality. So now we have comprehensives, and it is significant that Truss has gone to a comprehensive because she's amongst all these old Etonians. It's a significant achievement, and I would say the fact that we've had 3 female prime ministers, but we only now have one from a comprehensive, kind of Theresa May, shows that where the real inequality still lies, the greater inequality, let's say, which is class and wealth over things like gender. Yeah, well, let's talk about that a bit, Josh, because, I mean, you're a Labour voter. You would say you support the left. Is it not the case that the abolition of grammar schools did more to sort of damage the prospects of working-class kids than anything else?
That could certainly be argued, yeah. But the interesting thing is that what Liz Truss is doing is, and what she said actually in her speech, she said that the people virtue signaling. She was sick of people and this feels like a little bit of a virtue signal. It's like her signalling that she's actually the only person ever to have gone through the system.
Is it not quite an achievement? Because look, I've taught at private schools, so I know what they're like, and it is like a machine. You know, if a kid misses their homework once or twice, there's big staff meetings saying, "What on earth are we going to do? This is a disaster." At my school, I never did homework. None of us did. Right. The most we ever did was copy off some people at break time, and there were people throwing chairs in the classroom.
But did you go to grammar school?
No, I went to a comp.
But you then went to Oxford, right? And you got a doctorate. And now here you are. So comprehensive schools work for you?
No, I wouldn't say it was because of the comp.
Well, why not? You're doing amazing.
No, that's against all odds.
I'm the Liz Truss of headliners.
Try going to one, Josh. Try going to. I went to comprehensive school. I got the 3rd highest grade in the country.
So we've got someone else here who went to comprehensive.
Let me explain it.
Comprehensive is obviously doing amazing.
I'm going to explain it, Josh. I got the 3rd highest grade in the country at history A level. No one's ever suggested going to like Oxbridge or anything. Can you imagine that happening at a private or public school where not even one teacher mentions it? We were told we were rubbish. We had no chance at anything. We had massive class sizes. They're a total disaster. It's a left-wing...
Josh, they
stole social mobility from a generation. My dad got to go to grammar school from a poor background. They expect him to work in a factory, but he managed to go to grammar school because he was smart. Years later, we've gone backwards. I go to a comprehensive school. They've stolen a whole generation.
Nick, Josh has a point. Is that in terms of just the people who are here, we're not representative of the situation.
I think this is 100% representative.
No, I was on benefits for years. I've signed on for years. I've eventually, through my own endeavour, after lots of problems, managed to get onto GBNews. Well, that's great.
So have I.
But it's
I
been
went to
very
public
hard.
school.
Josh
also was on benefits.
Most of my former classmates are now serial killers. Okay. So, no, they didn't do well. Anyway, Thursday's Independent now. One group of people you don't want to annoy. It's M people.
Those M people.
Josh,
M people found it. Yeah, very scary. Very scary. Yeah.
Heather Small.
Oh, she's so small.
She's not actually that small, is she?
That's the great irony, of course, of mid-90s sort of dance music.
And this is moving on up.
Moving on up, yeah. M People founder Mike Pickering condemns Liz Truss using Moving On Up to come out to. This is actually, I mean, I know you guys you're intellectuals, you went to comprehensives, so you know what you're talking about. And you're talking about, like, the actual political ramifications. For me, the big decision, like, that's what I get excited about for Tory conferences. What is the leader going to come out to?
What, the music? Well, it was Dancing Queen for Theresa May, which was a nice attempt at a joke.
Yeah.
At least there was an attempt at humour in
Yeah,
that,
and also
wasn't there?
dancing, that was very funny as well.
Yeah.
So she's very
So
funny
should it be more
dancer.
comical? You see, I would always like a theme, some theme music as I enter a room. I'd quite
Just for you?
Yeah, I'd like to hire someone to play a ghetto blaster with something as I walk in, you know what I mean?
Sort of Italian opera or something.
That's the most
I was thinking
dated
more like-
reference of all that ghetto blaster. A cassette ghetto blaster that's massive.
That's exactly what I want. I want it to be an 80s sort of hip-hop, Run DMC type.
Okay.
But I mean, look, this is a song from 1993.
Yes.
That's very brave of her to choose a song that most of the conference are too old to get a reference for.
Nick, do you think there's been a big history of pop acts getting very upset with politicians using their songs? For instance, we had Adele and Aerosmith. Elton John's been angry at Donald Trump using it. We've had Bruce Springsteen and Ronald Reagan, born in the USA.
I was going to say.
So, but isn't it just the case that musicians, once they've made the song, they just have to let it go, right?
There are so many examples, Andrew. Some of the ones you mentioned, Bobby McFerrin versus Bush Senior was an extra one I found out about.
Classic.
There's been a Sting had one with W. Bush. I mean, David Cameron said he liked the Smiths. I don't know what Morrissey thought to that, but he probably wasn't that thrilled. My suggestion for Theresa May, the song she should have come out to, Mo Money, Mo Problems. Because that's exactly a problem with the budget, because she over-borrowed. Wouldn't that have been an ironic reference? Would anyone have got it? You didn't get it, so probably not. Or how about It's Growing by The Temptations, because she's all about growth?
Oh, that would have been good. Yeah.
I was thinking I'm Good by David Guetta. Because it's up to date. It's in the chart.
But what does that mean for her?
Nothing, it's just something a bit more recent.
Right, let's move on now to Thursday's Telegraph. And will anyone be able to buy a house in the future, Nick?
No. So mortgage rates...
Optimistic as ever.
Mortgage rates soar past 6% for the first time in 14 years. So for laymen like me on the economy, basically the budget caused the price of money to massively increase, right? So the market becomes scared. They're worried that interest rates will move way beyond the Bank of England's 2.5%. And the market starts to freak out. And that's what's happened here. And obviously the banks, therefore, they're worried about their loans, so they withdraw them and they wait till it settles down, which is exactly what's happened. They pulled all these mortgages, but now they're going to bring them back, but at a higher rate. So, yeah, and that's broadly the story.
Well, doom and gloom, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, look, Nick is very lucky. He got his North London townhouse before this all happened.
I had £87 in my bank account the other day. I live in a shoebox.
That's because you spent it all on the
I'm getting
townhouse.
attacked by the most privileged person, born into showbiz royalty.
I know that you have staff.
Absolutely ridiculous.
And that's where all your money's going. It's on your
disgusting.
au pairs and your
Face of white privilege.
Go on, Josh.
So, here's the thing. Someone borrowing £200,000 today to buy, which isn't a huge amount of money, certainly in the London market anyway, but it will have to pay an extra $5,500 over 2 years. That's a big jump over the last 2 weeks, essentially. That's a big mistake. That is something that's happened, and now it's even been backtracked.
But all of this with all of this turmoil that has come in the wake of the mini budget, as they've called it, might it not be the case that if they just hold fast, all of this is very short term. Maybe this time next year we'll start to see dividends from all of this kind of stuff.
Maybe, but that's not helping people right now who are trying to get onto the housing market. People who are selling houses, it's not helping the housing market itself.
No, but it's been difficult for a while. Hasn't it?
Yeah, but something like this could be catastrophic.
OK, all right, well, let's move on now to Thursday's Times, and this is a headline that reveals the extent of the police's inverted priorities over the last
Yeah,
few
this
years.
is actually an amazing story, I think. Certainly, if you have like a North London townhouse like Nick, then you're going to be very relieved now that all break-ins are going to be investigated. But see, people wouldn't ever try and rob my place, it's rubbish. But they'd see...
It's full of very valuable board games, from what I know.
They are a lot, but robbers don't know that they're valuable. That's the genius. Whereas they go to his with all his, gold watches and whatnot.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is great news. Police will attend every single burglary, the chairman of the National Police Chiefs Council said. About time. Some terrible figures here. 3.5% of home burglaries result in criminal charges. That is an insanely small figure. They recorded 1.76 million residential break-ins over the last 5 years. And 1.4 million of them had their case closed without even a suspect being identified.
So, riddle me this. Why is it that the police have so much time to investigate mean tweets online when they're basically not solving anything?
Of course. And that's exactly the problem. Where they're putting their resources, certainly into these things like hate crimes or non-hate crimes, as they are.
Non-hate crimes even more scary, isn't it?
It just shows the absolute sort of wrong course that the police have taken. Hopefully, they're now going to be coming back and doing their job, which is solving actual...
And Nick,
crimes.
there have been some sort of very positive overtures from Swella Braverman about this, about getting the police in order, getting them to do their jobs. Most people, when they're burgled now, they know that nothing's going to happen. They're not even going to find a suspect.
Yeah, well, she told an anecdote about being robbed, on a moped, her phone was stolen, and how the police don't even care about that. They only cared about the insurance number for insurance, but the crime number, for insurance purposes.
Yeah.
Now, I got robbed by some lads on a moped, and they didn't even care about that. I didn't get a reply by email from the police, so that she did better than me.
Got it, but you didn't have the phone to.
Yes, or you can get emails on computers sometimes.
Oh, okay, I don't know.
No, you're not.
I can't afford a computer. I don't have an awful lot of time.
So it is a complete disaster. But I do worry about this with break-ins being investigated. Will they find time to investigate memes? That is my concern.
Yeah.
But why don't we just go back to the Robert Peel principles? He had it all laid out: policing by consent, have a high presence on the street. We had it all right in the past. We've abandoned it because now the police are the woke enforcement arm of the new ideology. Whatever you want to call
Okay,
them.
very interesting. Up next, we have Thursday's Guardian. Are we heading for winter blackouts, Nick?
Yeah, UK prepares for winter blackouts as energy rationing campaign discussed.
What do they mean by that, energy rationing?
Well, yes, this is the new world, Andrew. This is the energy lockdowns we're heading for. It's all the WEF. So Liz Truss has ruled it out, but that doesn't mean that much, as we've seen recently. So the ministers are considering a public information campaign that basically tells you to be careful about your energy. It's kind of pointless. They're going to tell you to use your dishwasher at night and your washing machine in the middle of the night. Or they're debating whether to bother doing this. So it seems pretty unnecessary to me. I mean, as Rees Mogg says in the article, there's a strong price signal, which is a way of saying you can't afford energy anyway, so that'll be the thing that stops you doing it. So the question is whether they need this additional campaign to tell you to, ration your energy, because they're trying to sort out Mogg's trying to sort out this thing with Qatar and Norway, where we'll import more gas from them. But in the short term, of course, we've been short-sighted. We haven't planned for this. We've had eco-nuts running everything, so we haven't planned for this war. We're a net importer of energy, as you know. So the question is, what are we going to do in the short term? And are we going to have blackouts? Are we going to have power cuts?
Haven't we? Whether we should have been more prepared for this kind of eventuality. The world's 5th largest economy should be able to sustain international problems of this kind. Is it just an issue that we haven't been preparing in terms of domestic energy supply?
Yeah, of course it is. And it was just short-sightedness, and it was making a short profit, selling off the gas storage units that could have... if we'd had those, that would have been a massive help.
This sort of, we're all in it together, so let's all, ration our energy consumption during the winter, is this likely to take off? Are people going to be happy about this?
No, I don't think they are. And also the fact that Liz Truss seems to have this policy of saying, I don't want to tell people what to do. Well, that's not a big help. Someone actually needs to step up and tell people and say, hey, actually, maybe it is a good idea to put on your washing just before you go to bed.
But do you really want a text campaign saying, do your washing at night?
There's a difference between do your washing at night and hey, maybe you should.
Yeah,
maybe that's a good idea.
I'll wake our neighbour. They're directly downstairs below the washing machine.
I haven't done a washing for... he's fine with his townhouse, doesn't have neighbours, but...
You do it by hand.
I don't...
Yeah.
You go and beat your clothes against a rock.
I bet you have a tumble dryer in your house.
I do? Of course I don't have a tumble dryer.
You do.
Right, enough.
I'm going to take photos when I get home.
Competition of grievances like the 4 Yorkshiremen all over again. That's it for part 1. Coming up, the UK's most popular baby names, foreign nurses, and the state of Scottish prisons. See you in 2 minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Headliners, where we're taking you Thursday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle, and with me, the darling of the left, Josh Howie, and the big dog of the right, Nick Dixon. Woof, woof. Thursday's Mirror now, and the annual list of the UK's most popular baby names has been released. And I, for one, look forward to this day every year, Josh. Very exciting.
It is very exciting, but it feels like it happens every 3 or 4 months. Maybe there's different people releasing this list under their own...
different charts.
Different charts,
yeah.
So this is the chart from the Office of National Statistics. And Oliver has been knocked off.
Good, and they're never like that.
We don't like Oliver.
No.
Mohammed was the most popular boy's name in 4 out of 9 English regions. That's kind of interesting. Noah is now the top.
Noah
is
very biblical. Are they going to be like Melchizedek and Nebuchadnezzar? And
Noah. You say that, but there's Isaac. There's Reuben. Is coming up strong. So the biblical name. Now, when I look at this list every year, I just want to make sure that none of my 5 kids are on this list.
But your kids' names are quite unusual, aren't they?
Yeah. When we went biblical, we went...
You went obscure biblical, though.
Mordecai.
Mordecai.
No, they ain't getting on no top 100 list.
Well, he might do now that you're publicising.
You think so? I don't. But even but they're not all. They're all named after Jewish entertainers. So it's like Bet after Bette Midler.
I thought you got that from a Wes Anderson movie, Mordecai.
No. Zero. There's Zero from Zero Mostel. From the producers. They're all named after Jewish entertainers.
It's difficult, though, isn't it, Nick? I don't know how many kids you've got. You've probably
6.
got some. Yeah, but you don't know.
I just wanted to beat Josh.
You don't know where they are.
Very full townhouse.
Are they... I mean, it's difficult naming kids because you don't want to be unoriginal, but if you're too original, that sort of lumbers the child with some name that they're likely to get bullied for.
I've observed the kind of middle-class name inflation. So a little while ago, it became the middle-class thing to start calling your kids things like Oscar, Oliver, as we've said here, and there's Louis and things like this. It keeps going up and up. So we started with Oliver. Now Oliver's out, and it's like Hugo. Because what it is sort of middle-class people who aren't actually posh, but they want to aspire and seem posh in this weird status game. So they get increasingly posh names. Whereas in my day, you were just called Christian names. Now Christian names are gone. I don't mean first names. We still have those. But names like Luke are declining. Matthew's declining. These are all declining as the culture declines. And we did a story the other day. We have ridiculous Netflix names like 11, which just sounds like you've had 10 kids and you can't think of a name anymore. And Simba was even a name.
You were talking about someone called... My son's called Zero.
Zero. Sounds quite similar to 11.
Maybe...
Elon Musk's kid was called XEA12.
Yeah.
Like C-3PO.
That's in the Torah.
Is that right?
But it's also interesting how, of course, like you say, the names of on people on TV, popular names, usually has a big impact. So Nick has gone down massively. And I think Joshua's gone up. Joshua's right there, interesting.
Andrew's a good name, people at home. Just go with Andrew. It means manly, which is me through and through. On to Thursday's Express now, and a nurse has lost her job for comments she made on TV. Nick, of course, this is based on a viral clip, wasn't it?
Yes.
All over.
I'm being sacked. Nurse who said Tory voters don't deserve resuscitation, set to lose job. Has she actually lost it now?
She made the claim that she had been sacked,
So now this was a clip that went round, and people start to say this is cancel culture. So the nurse was saying, if you voted Tory, you shouldn't be resuscitated. Now, the problem with that is people say she shouldn't lose her job, shouldn't be cancelled. But there is a case that she should, because if you're a nurse saying it, that's kind of an issue. It suggests you might let patients die. I'm not saying she would, but the phrase suggests that. Now, if Leo Kerr said it on this show, you go, well, that's what he says silly things, that's his job.
Was she joking, though?
He's not a nurse. She was not joking in the clip, if you look at it. She didn't seem to be. And she called it harsh in the clip. I would go with evil, but she went with harsh. And obviously it's dangerous if you're a nurse. It's... I don't know. This is a tricky one because you don't want people to lose their jobs and things. But why did she even think she could say this as well? This is an interesting question to me. Why do you think
that is true? I mean, Josh, this is an interesting one. So this was on a Channel 5 debate programme called Britain on the Brink. She says this comment about how Tory voters don't deserve to be resuscitated. Now, the thing about that is she's not working for the NHS. I think she works for the private sector. But, you know, if I was a teacher still, when I was a teacher, if I was on a televised debate and I said something equivalent about kids in a school, I would know that that violates my contract because part of the contract was you can't bring the school into disrepute or the profession into disrepute. Is that really cancel culture? Is that the same thing?
It's a fine distinction, isn't it? The thing is, she said something very stupid, very offensive, and potentially dangerous, as you say. But she did then backtrack pretty much immediately and
so
said...
you're saying it was like a slip of the tongue, something she wasn't really thinking
you're right.
through.
Why she thought she could say it is ridiculous. But, I mean, come on, man. We've said very stupid, offensive things in the past. The fact that she instantly caught herself on it, recognised it and said, of course, I would resuscitate them, but it's appalling the way we've been treated. She was frustrated.
Let's be fair, she backtracked because the audience all went, boo, that's awful. If she'd been amongst an audience that liked it, she'd have been like, yeah...
But what does it serve? What function does it serve, actually? Look, I agree, it's a really horrible thing to say. I think it was really genuinely horrible. But what function does it serve having her sacked?
Well, look, I don't revel in the misfortune of anyone except maybe James O'Brien. But when it's so it's hard for me to sit here and say she should be. I'm not going to say she should be. I'm saying there's an argument for it because if it's a nurse, the fact that she thought it was OK to say it, and the fact it's too far. But it's a bit like I felt similar when Trevor Sinclair said that thing about the Queen. He said this horrific thing about the Queen. Of course, he can say it. But you just think, how do people end up thinking these things are OK? I think it's because they're in echo chambers. We're in a sort of lefty culture. They're on Twitter. They get used to saying things.
But she's a nurse. She's on a TV debate show. It's difficult. People say stupid stuff. You've got the adrenaline. She's trying to make a point. It's very hard to
She should let people die because they voted for a mainstream...
which is an offensive and stupid thing to say. Then she immediately backed
that, isn't it? If you're a nurse, it's beyond that.
Look, I think she was an idiot at saying something like that. Whether she should lose her job.
Interesting question, though. When it comes to cancel culture, what I don't like is when people they think that someone has expressed an opinion that they disagree with, so they target their employers to try and get them sacked. When you say something that is obviously unprofessional in the context of your job, isn't that you just violating
risking people's lives?
I mean,
I know.
It's a difficult one.
Someone the other day on Twitter said, "Oh, J.K. Rowling's saying this about mermaids," but the guy said it 10 years ago. But the thing is, if you're a paedophile 10 years ago, that's still a problem. People are now using this anti-cancel culture thing to mean anyone who's actually committed crimes or you know what I mean. There is a line.
Well, anyway, we're never going to resolve that tonight, but let's move on to Thursday's Daily Mail. And isn't caring meant to be a universal language? Why do we limit this to English, John?
Well, this is actually a really good way. The NHS has got a really good system now for avoiding hiring nurses who wouldn't resuscitate any Tory voters by just hiring people who don't speak English. And that way they don't have to express their opinions and their jobs will be safe. So there we go, well done. Foreign nurses who fail English tests can still be hired by the NHS after industry regulator waters down the rules. We had 23,000 foreign trained nurses start, 2/3 from India and the Philippines, and that accounts for half of all the new joiners. That's a huge percentage.
So obviously the NHS has always sustained itself through immigration, but when it comes to the language, that does cause problems, surely, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
In terms of patient care.
When you think that they're basically, I think there's 50,000 people understaffed across nursing and doctors and whatnot. Absolutely, more than ever, we need to have people coming in from different countries, and there's a deficiency in those countries as well. They don't have enough nurses.
But is it not fair to, as a patient, to expect that the person
of course it's
speak
fair.
the language?
So the idea that now we're sort of in such a desperate state that we're having to sort of water that down is not indicative of the hiring policies that the NHS have been employing the last few years.
How would you feel about it, Nick, being treated by someone who couldn't speak English?
There could be, as well, it depends what state I was in. There could be a certain area that our services are under such pressure because of excessive immigration, and now we need to get more immigrants to deal with the problem. So you see what I mean? We need more staff because we have so many patients. So you could argue that. And
you
also,
could wrongly argue that.
There is also an ethical argument that we're taking these people from places that have shortages of their own. So that's also an ethical argument. So, and as for the other part, it is a lowering of standards to say, you have to pass this certain level of English. OK, we need staff. Oh, you don't anymore. So I'm generally against the lowering of standards. As you saw from my grammar school's rant, I'm against the lowering of standards in all cases.
Yeah, although, if you've got an embarrassing ailment, maybe it's better if they can't speak English. Avoid that awkward conversation. Anyway, on to Thursday's Times now. Now, this is a shock, a surprising amount of gender dysphoria among Scottish convicts, Nick. Who would have thought that?
I know. Half of Scottish trans prisoners changed gender after convictions. So there were 16 trans inmates, of whom 8 began their transition being cared for in custody. The obvious worry is, one, they're trying to get into male prisons, female prisons, sorry. Now, but try and get... Well, there's two ways. There's getting out of male prisons because they're dangerous. Then there's the more sinister intent of deliberately wanting to get into female prisons for reasons we could speculate on. So it's incredibly disturbing. We had this thing from Sussex Police recently where an obvious man had committed a crime and they were saying it's a woman and they were telling off anyone who said it was a man. So it's completely obscene. I was talking to a gentleman on the street the other day who watches GB News, and he was concerned about Pakistani Muslims, which was his background, getting blamed for crimes and getting tarnished. So there is a concern about that. But I'm in favour of say who's done the crime. So if it's white men, let's say it's white men.
Yeah.
If it's women, let's say it's women. If it's men, let's say it's men.
I mean, I don't think anyone's suggesting that trans people are inherently predatory, although people like to pretend that people are suggesting that. The point is that if you have a self-identification system, and if you are an exploitative male predator, that's a great thing that you can exploit and get into a female prison. It's actually happened.
I'm not saying trans people are predatory. I'm saying in some cases men are, so we have to say they're men, not women.
98% of sexual offences are carried out by men, and there is no evidence that trans women who are physically male still, commit sexual offences at any lesser rate. In fact, 6 trans prisoners of this 16 are in prison for current or previous sex offences.
So this is one of these things that I think a lot of people just didn't know was happening because it sounds so absurd. There have been some people who have been guilty of sexual assault, identifying as women, being moved to a women's prison and actually committing further sexual assault. It's actually happened. And I think one of the reasons that has been allowed to happen is because it sounds like the stuff of fantasy.
Yeah, and it should be pointed out that women in prison are some of the most vulnerable people in our society. The reason they're in prison is usually from broken backgrounds, being sexually abused when they were kids, and that perpetuating into their adulthood. So the idea that then they have to be dealing with a male-bodied person within prison, and people have been pointing this out for years, have been, oh, it never happens. Oh, God, you're such a bigot, why would you point this out? Oh, or you see people just trying to, like, put their fingers in their ears and just sort of wish it away. But it's happened, it's happening.
I mean, isn't the liberal approach the best way that people can identify however they choose to, so long as it doesn't encroach on the rights of others? And as soon as that happens, you have to take a stand. And when it comes to prisons, when it comes to women's only spaces, surely that's the point where biology matters more than anything. It's got to.
Of course it does, and just the fact that this has been going on, and the fact that this actually could get even worse in terms of what's happening in Scotland. This is all in Scotland.
Well, the Scottish government is very bad on this.
Yeah, and where they're pushing through the self-ID, it's going to become even more problematic.
OK, well, that is it for this part. Coming up, these two will be casting their searing intellects toward the integrity of chess, star signs, and the great robot uprising. See you there.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle. And tonight I've got the wonderful Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. We're going to start with Thursday's Financial Times here. Is the integrity of chess at stake, Nick? When is it not?
Great question, Andrew. So this is about Hans Niemann, who is accused of cheating against Magnus Carlsen. And obviously people were suspicious because no one beats Magnus Carlsen because he's the greatest chess genius of all time.
I beat him.
Josh beat him, but he cheated. It was 50... Magnus Carlsen had won 53 games in a row leading up to this match, and then he lost, so there were already alarm bells. And this Hans Niemann had cheated in the past when he was 12 and 16. Now,
that's allowed, though, isn't it?
The defence for him is that he had cheated on online chess, where all kinds of quite high-ranking players have admitted to cheating, whereas this was over-the-board, real chess, and he was accused of cheating. At one point, he was accused of using vibrating... I don't know if I can say what they were, but there were things
inserted in places.
In part of him.
Your bottom, beads...
Yeah.
But is that possible, Nick? I know that you're wearing them now. Do you think that it happened? Would it work for you? If I send this signal to you...
You're sending a signal right now.
Yeah, I think I'd change a lot of my behaviour.
Are you picking it up or not?
No, I didn't get that. So it's not. Okay. So he didn't cheat. We found out officially.
Oh, he didn't cheat?
Well, no, if I'm saying going by Josh's system. Okay. Don't worry, Andrew. Carlsen just tweeted a thing that was Jose Mourinho. You'll know Jose Mourinho, Andrew, because you're a big football fan. And
he's the opera singer.
He's a football manager.
Oh, yeah.
There's a famous clip of him saying, I prefer not to speak. If I speak, I am in trouble. So that's all Carlsen said. He said, I'm not going to speak. But he withdrew from the contest immediately in the second, something like the second game, because he said he was so convinced this guy had cheated. But the guy, Niemann is claiming that he didn't, because he's saying the problem is Niemann had played Carlsen in the past online, and he'd played like a much higher ranking player. Carlsen's about 200 points ahead of him in ranking, but he'd played like a much stronger player. So there are questions.
I don't know why we're surprised, really. I mean, chess is all about intrigue and backstabbing and being Machiavellian. Although I'm surprised by this, talking about how dozens of grandmasters have confessed to cheating when they play online.
That's not...
If they're grandmasters... Why? They shouldn't have to cheat.
That was the thing that surprised me the most. It says there's a widespread tolerance of it online. Like, why is there a tolerance of it?
Because there's a certain ingenuity, I suppose, to be able to do it.
Yeah, but also it's quite interesting, the chess.com, how they found out people are cheating. They can detect if you've opened up a different browser, and they can detect also the differences between your detection of behaviour, the way that you open up, and your performances.
I had no idea the world of chess was so brutal. It's almost like a blood sport, really.
Yeah.
On to the mail once more, and a story I know that Josh is passionate about. Horoscopes.
Indeed. TikToker goes viral. They've highlighted the 4 zodiac signs that are shared by the world's most notorious serial killers. I'm not really into serial killers. I know you are a little bit, aren't you?
Well, only fictional ones. I like horror films.
Okay, not okay.
Fictional ones.
Well,
real ones I don't like at all. I find them very disappointing.
So Virgo, Gemini, Pisces, which I am.
Yes.
That's a bit scary. And Sagittarius.
So wait, are those the ones that
Those are the 4. They're saying they got a big list of all of these serial killers, and it turns out that pretty much all of them are on one of those 4.
So if you just locked up all kids that were Pisces, you would protect society? Is that
essentially not? Or you could look up all men who are American. Because that also seems to be most of the list as well.
I've got to stand up for myself here and all my fellow Scorpios, because we are not on the list, despite what people say about us. And it even says here, the most surprising thing is that Scorpio is not on it. It's like we are misunderstood. So I resent that. The main thing they have in common, Andrew, is they've all killed loads of people.
Yeah.
And that's the key point to focus on. I also like this bit. It says both Virgos, so Ed Gein and Boston Strangler Albert DeSalvo are both Virgos, a sign that is associated with meticulous attention to detail. If it was that meticulous, they wouldn't have got caught. That's all I'm saying. A Scorpio would have not even got caught.
Also, she said Pisces is surprising to nobody, either because they let stuff build up and then they explode. No, we do not!
I can imagine Pisces. They're very slippery, aren't they? There's a fish.
If you look into it more, you find out it's a cherry-picked study and all signs of
look, it's just all nonsense. Anyway, let's move on.
It's science!
Thursday's Independent. Once more, the potential for evil lurks within us all, it seems. Well, it definitely lurks within you, Nick. I've seen it.
It actually doesn't, because I've done the dark triad test, which tests if you're a psychopath or a Machiavellian or narcissistic.
Yes.
I was mildly narcissistic, but I was lighter than the average person the test told me, so I'm actually a great person. The only time I might kill would be to defend my family, and this is what this article about, is are you capable of killing someone? And it's based on it's sort of think piece off the back of this BBC drama Inside Man, where Stanley Tucci's character argues you are capable of it. But an actual professor of criminology at Birmingham University, David Wilson, has said, no, you're not really, otherwise the murder rate would be much higher. And then there's this claim we're more into murder now than in the past because of all these trashy Netflix shows that are trying to degrade the culture. But actually, he says we had public hangings in the past as a matter of sort of a fun event, so we're not really that obsessed.
I don't buy it. I can believe that, obviously, public hangings. I mean, the Elizabethan period, you would take your children out for a family day out to see someone disemboweled in the square. And so I can get that there's an appetite for violence and gore and all the rest of it. I don't think I'd like to think that most people aren't capable of actually killing people.
I read in this book about war, and they've tested guns after World War II. Supposedly 3/4 of the guns had never even been fired.
Interesting. Because they didn't want to.
Because the Judeo-Christian thing goes so deep into your moral core that people just didn't want to kill.
Yes.
And so that's why they. Yeah, where do you think that came from, mate? Anyway, when did you last time you went to church, by the way, Mr. Christian? You're always going on about it, but I never...
You two are just
squabbling
I'm too busy enjoying my
But that's why
townhouse.
they had to bring in the Marines and all that stuff, like the Full Metal Jacket. They had to sort of literally brainwash teenagers for Vietnam, and then the murder rate went up that much more.
You're reversing the whole process of socialisation, effectively.
Well, that's what they had to do, and that's what they had to learn to do from the back of these studies. But what's interesting here is he says, like, it's just not true the way that people talk. This guy who's carried out this study, Wilson, and he says you've got... like in Silence Lambs, you've got an evil genius who talks about Florentine architecture, fine foods, and love backs Toccata's. And when I read that, I was just thinking,
Yeah.
That's you. That sums you up, isn't it?
Look, I don't know about this. I mean, I think we all get angry from time to time. We get a bit of rage.
Could you murder someone? I
could be a serial killer. You'd be called, like, the Professor or something.
I mean, that would be quite cool, but I just couldn't do it.
I'm not going to be a serial killer, but I could definitely murder someone.
Really?
Yeah, I've got a lot of anger.
You do, unresolved, as it happens.
Yeah, and that murder would help, I think.
Yeah. All right, well, let's not advise that, Josh. We're going to move on now to Thursday's Times and teaching by consent on the rise.
Gen Z students force out a strict chemistry professor, Maitland Jones Jr., by the way, who wrote, like, supposedly the seminal text on organic chemistry.
Where's he? New
York University, but I believe this was like Princeton, where he was studied, where he taught for years. And a bunch of students got together because they essentially failed. And they've not renewed his contract, which is unbelievable. This is the problem, of course, in America, and to a lesser degree here, but when you have a consumerist educational system, it gives so much power to the students. As he argues, it has the normal... They're arguing there's a sort of COVID angle to the story because about 59% got A's and B's, which is the normal rate, but the people who were failing, who weren't rocking up to the actual in-school lessons, who were just watching online, they got much worse marks than normal.
But it's so entitled. I mean, they've signed this petition, these undergraduates, and they've said things like, these scores are not an accurate reflection of the time and effort put in. They're not effort grades.
Yeah, it's results.
They're grades about results. I mean, it's so entitled.
And it's a bunch of 18-year-olds.
What do you think about this?
And just so we don't get sued, it's at NYU. He moved from Princeton in 2007. But exactly. He was a legendary professor. He wrote his seminal book. It's a typical lowering of standards. I talked about it before with the grammar schools. Standards are uncomfortable because they're naturally... They differentiate between people. We now have this culture that believes in equity, equality of outcome. People are uncomfortable with any standards of any kind. And the key point here is that not that the 18-year-olds complain, which is the kind of thing they might do, but the administration pandered
why are they
and gave in.
capitulating to this nonsense? Why don't they just say, work a bit harder, you'll get a higher grade?
Exactly.
What about
what's
that?
quite honourable...
Well, they're cowards.
I'm sounding really reactionary and conservative right now, but I do think...
No, I agree. Certainly with something like organic chemistry, when these people can go on possibly to be doctors or researchers, whatever it is they're going to do, they've got to know their stuff.
But this is one argument against the private schools full stop, because, you know, I've taught at private schools. You'd have kids basically treating it like a cash and carry, like a business, and they would say to me things like, just tell me what I need to write in the exam to get the top marks. Like, this isn't how education works.
It's entitlement.
You know?
But to be fair to this guy, and he sounds really admirable, because he says, look, I don't want my job back, I'm done with it, but what I do want is to make sure this does not happen to someone else. Respect.
Yeah. Thursday's Daily Star next, and is this the dawn of the inevitable robot uprising?
I think it is, Andrew. This is Flippy the robot, and he sparks job fears after... I mean, I thought the fears were about that they'll become Terminators, but the fears are that he's going to learn to fry chips better than humans, and therefore people will lose their jobs.
I think you already can flip burgers
That's the accusation.
It's Flippy 2.
It's Flippy 2.
That's the scary one.
Oh, right.
The sequel.
And this is the whole problem we have. Obviously, this is why they're doing all these lockdowns and everything. As you know, it's people are going to become obsolete, and they're training us to get used to it.
Don't give us your WEF conspiracy
Get your Twitter clip out.
Well, it's why they're doing universal basic income, where the useless eaters...
I'm just worried about robots taking our jobs, stealing our women. You know what I mean?
They're doing
It's just ridiculous.
Cooking our food, frying our food.
All of this.
Why are you worried about the women, Andrew?
I was just using a cliche that I know that people use.
Flippy 2, I sense a short-circuit reboot myself. I think this could be the beginning of a new era.
Not happy about this. On we go to Thursday's Independent once more, and the three of us are about to seriously impress the GB News audience with our sheer grasp of scientific knowledge. Come on then, Josh.
Scientists discover shape-shifting material that could revolutionise robotics, transformers, robots in disguise. But this is about materials that can morph according to their environment and change, the heat. And they've created, that's been done with metal, but the problem is it's very brittle. But now this is the MIT in America. They've created a type of ceramic that can change up to 10%. They're saying this will have a big impact, certainly on like smaller little micro things. That's
I don't really understand this. What I'm thinking of is that robot in Terminator 2 that
T-1000
that can melt into other shapes and uses it to kill people.
Yeah, that's like that, but a tiny one that could move from there to here.
That's enough to cause a bit of damage.
Yeah, so
I don't trust it.
Not a great
I don't
film.
trust it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's the T-1000. That's my scientific opinion.
Yeah.
And it's also a bit like Venom. Remember Venom, the suit? And I made you watch Venom 2. I finally watched it the other night, Venom 2. It's very, very poor. But I maintain the first Venom is good.
You made me watch Venom 2, and
wow. Have you watched the first one?
I have now, yes.
It is very good, the first one. The second one's very poor.
Good.
It's good.
It's not Citizen Kane, is it? It's, you know...
And that's my opinion on this.
OK, we've got a story now about... what's this about now?
NASA.
Oh, this is about NASA. So an asteroid test that has left destruction and debris in space. It's very dramatic.
Yes, well, this is the DART mission. We talked about DART before because it sounded like they got the acronym first and then they went back and thought a double asteroid redirection test. And what it is, they're trying to stop asteroids hitting the Earth. OK, fine. But now they've left a massive debris in space, and that's going to hit us instead. Well, I'm adding that last bit, but it could happen.
Well, they've said they're going to reassure us by saying that this asteroid that they've hit is not going to hit us. But maybe in hitting it, they've redirected towards us.
That's what I thought. Like
aliens are now going to come and say, excuse me, you just killed us all with your big asteroid.
Well, isn't this the plot of Armageddon, where they have to go up, or Deep Impact, where they have to go up and explode?
It's both of them. They're both excellent films, but for me, it's Deep Impact that wins the day, emotionally.
But is this where we're at? Is this how we're going to go out? That's how the dinosaurs went out, right?
Possibly, but what they haven't found yet is whether it actually had an impact or not. Like, I mean, we know there was a literal impact, but we don't know if it's actually changed course.
So the asteroid wasn't exploded; it just got a bit knackered and carried on going.
Yeah, but we do know there are 6,000 miles of debris in outer space now. We don't know what that does.
So humans are basically just created our first rubbish tip in space. Well done, humanity.
Good job, NASA. And lastly, from the Times, this is a tale of classic British overestimation of one's abilities, Josh.
So I love this. OK, so let me just read the headline. Britain attempted Mont Blanc climb wearing tracksuit. Now let's cut to the first line of the article. A British hiker is in an Italian hospital with extreme hypothermia. That's how...
I mean, that's not funny. God bless him.
Well, his body went down to 25 degrees, 10 degrees below the hypothermia threshold. Feda Hussein, 26, he's an aeronautical engineering graduate, probably didn't graduate after that guy who...
I mean, surely he should have put a cardigan on or something.
Yeah, this is a bit crazy. He went out without ropes or an ice pick or crampons, and they found him, luckily. He did call, and they tried to get to him, and they couldn't get there because of the wind and whatnot, but they finally did.
Goodness me.
I lived in Newcastle. I lived in Newcastle for 4 years. It wouldn't have phased the Geordies this at all. They'd have easily made it. They've been training for it for years. They've never worn coats. I think this guy's a total legend. It's what the empire was built on.
Oh, you said that this was just an expression of machismo. Yeah. And he should be congratulated.
Oh, total ledge. Yeah.
But so the Italian media initially thought that he was actually an illegal immigrant trying to cross over through to France. But then they found the only ID he had on him was his girlfriend's credit card.
And then they found out...
A little bit dodgy.
Listen,
they found out
we could talk about this all night, but we do have to end the programme, I'm afraid. Thanks very much. Join us again at 11 o'clock for Headliners. Farewell.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate, and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer